Good morning, wonderful listeners of the South Coast Radio. And I know that we have listeners from beyond our borders. So welcome to everyone to this morning's chat. We've had a request from Samantha to chat a bit about work-life balance. Now, like everything in life, to have balance, we need to have boundaries. So it starts again with the boundaries that I've discussed on 2 occasions, and you can find those talks that I shared with you on Spotify and on YouTube if you want to go and look, or of course you can give me a shout and I'll send them to you. Now, work-life balance is incredibly important. If we don't have that balance, so much other areas of our life suffer, not only our personal health, our personal emotional and psychological well-being, but also our relationships and our self-care. Now, in order to have balance, we need to have boundaries, as I've said. Now, there are 2 situations that we look at nowadays. We have a lot of our listeners who work from home. Since COVID, companies have realized that actually we don't have to, rent so much office space. We can let our employees work from home. And if you work from home like I do, my rooms are at my home, it is vitally important that you can have the time boundary and the space boundary between home life and office life, so that I know that I'm in my office at 7:30 in the morning, and I walk out of my office at more or less 5:30. I do consult till 6, but I'm not every evening. So 5:30, unless I'm consulting or have paperwork to do, I walk out of my office and I close the door. And I do not go in there unless there is something that warrants it. So I don't go and look at my business emails over a weekend because you tend to read them, then you get involved, and before you know it, you've spent 2, 3, 4 hours in the office that should have been your personal time, your family time, time with friends, time for self-care, etc., etc. So if you cannot have those boundaries, then you, particularly if you work from home, or of course the other side is also that it's so easy to go and sit on the couch and reach for the remote and think, no, I won't go into the office now. And so working from home is not perhaps for everyone. But if you are working from home, it is vitally important that you have that boundary of, now it is work time, I'm going to be in my office and I will focus on that. And now it is my time, my family time, and I am not going to look at my emails or quickly send a message or reply to a call. As I say, in my case, of course, unless it is vitally important. If you work in an office, if you go out to an office, then of course it is very important that you take your tea time in the morning and that you take a lunchtime and an afternoon tea. Don't work through your tea time, don't work through your lunchtime, because if you do it often enough, it becomes a habit. And you start feeling guilty about taking tea time. You start feeling guilty about taking a lunchtime. However long your lunchtime is would depend on your hours that you work. But let's say for the sake of argument, you have an hour's lunch and you tend to sit in the office behind your desk and look at your emails and, fiddle with your admin on your desk. It becomes your employer starts expecting you to be available at lunchtime, and you start feeling guilty about taking a lunchtime. And the same for working overtime. If home time is 5 o'clock, well, it's 5 o'clock. Sorry, boss, I'm going home to my family, to my friends, to doing whatever I choose to do with my time. Again, if you tend to stay after office hours, it becomes the new normal, and breaking that becomes difficult. Of course, there are situations like financial year end or, a specific deadline where you may have to, for a limited period of time, work overtime, take work home, sort of have a shorter lunch break, that kind of thing. That is normal. And once it's in the financial year end, I've submitted my reports, we've had the meeting, I go back to my normal working hours. It has a shelf life. It is not the new normal. Really, Samantha, if you can't maintain these boundaries, that is when work-life balance starts to be out of whack. When you're spending way too much time with work-related activities and not enough time on personal activities, whatever those are. If you have a family, of course, your family's ticked off because you're always busy with work and they start feeling unimportant or second or third down the ladder. And your personal well-being also starts to suffer. And burnout is a real thing. We all know that burnout, stress and anxiety, we start developing all those other issues that go with being out of balance, like having a diet. You can't just decide from now on, I am only going to eat butternut, for example. You need a varied diet. You need a balanced diet. And the same applies to our life. We need variety. You need exercise. I was listening to a talk the other day by Professor Francois Durant, I think it is, and he was highlighting the importance of exercise, that exercise is probably the best antidepressant. It is so good in preventing Alzheimer's and senile dementia, or delaying the onset thereof. Of course, for cardiovascular health, it's good for, I'm not going to bore you with that. The benefits are legion. So please make time for exercise, make time for self-care, make time for whatever your spiritual convictions are, to pursue those. Make time to read, make time for your family and friends, and then make time to be alone, to sit and look inward and decide what your priorities are and what is important to you. And speaking of priorities, that also comes into a work-life balance. What are your priorities? Where does family, husband, children, boyfriend fit in? Where does going to the gym fit in? Where does your personal pursuits, hobbies, and interests fit in? We have to find time for those things. And really, as I started off by saying, it really is the ability to say, no, I'm sorry, but I cannot help you. I think we've had the talk about how to say yes to the person and no to the request, which is very useful to say if someone asks you for something, you say, I can see you have an issue or you need something done. Unfortunately, I haven't got the time. I'm not the right person, but perhaps you can consider, and you suggest another, depending on the request, another solution to the person. So you haven't just said, no, not interested. And I don't want to say there isn't a time for that flat refusal. But generally we try and be pretty decent but firm about it. So if your boss says to you, please, can you stay on an extra hour tonight after work to finish the whatever, you can say, you know what, I do appreciate that this particular task needs to be completed. But unfortunately, I have commitments at home, so I'm not able to stay after work to finish that. And that's the end of that, and your boss will have to. And here again, I'm not saying that should be used as an excuse for you not doing your job during your working hours. If you're not completing the work that is in your job description, either there is too much work and another person has to be appointed, or your time management at work is poor, or perhaps you are just overcommitted and overextended in that particular position. So I don't want to get into that because that's another discussion in its entirety. But decide what is important to you and don't be afraid to say no. It is a case of the willing horse. gets asked for everything. If you keep saying, yes, I'll be the one to stay after work to take the minutes of a meeting, or I'll be the one to stay after work to finish a particular task, eventually it becomes expected of you. And it becomes increasingly difficult for you to say no. And it becomes increasingly easy for your colleagues or your superiors to expect you to do it. And that is then where it becomes a little bit more challenging to say, you know what, I know I have been in the past happy to stay after work, or happy to do this, or happy to do the next thing, or happy to work in a lunch hour. But I've had to rethink my priorities, and unfortunately, I will not be able to continue to do that. Let's have a meeting tomorrow and see how we can find a solution that will get the job done and will suit everyone else. So really, your work-life balance has to be a priority. In other words, yes, my work is important. I need the income to support myself and my family. I love what I do. However, there is more to me and there is more to my life than just working. So how can we improve that work-life balance, Samantha? For one, plan ahead so that you know that next week you need to make time for going to the gym, for making sure that you and your family can sit down and have a nice supper together, and that you know what's expected of you in your work. You know, in 2 weeks' time, there's a big meeting coming up and your input is vitally important, so you have to prepare your report. Start working on that timeously. Start getting the input you need from your report from your colleagues timeously. Give them the heads up, nudge them a bit so you get it, and they don't dump it on your desk a day or two before this important meeting, and you now have to spend the rest of the evening trying to get it together. So plan ahead. Secondly, embrace the fact that you are entitled to your time after hours. And that I would include your tea time and your lunch break. That is your right. You cannot be expected to work overtime unless you're in one of those jobs like doctors, I think, police, those services, of course, are governed by another part of our labour law. Work at your task. So I want to say set blocks of time aside for different tasks. So you can say, but this morning from 9 to 11, I'm dedicating those 2 hours to work on this job, and then I'll get to another aspect of my job, so that I can, part of planning ahead, so that I can say by the end of the week or in 2 weeks' time, I would have completed these tasks. I'll be well on my way with completing the next task, and I have made a solid start on something that's maybe due or has to be completed later on in the month or next month. End work at a certain time. As I've said, stick to your home time. There has to be a very good reason for you to stay after hours. And if it is, as I say, something like when it's financial year end, we know all the people in that sector of commerce and industry have to put in the extra effort to get things done. But they know, on that date, I hand in my financials, da-di-da, and it's finished, and then life can get back to normal. Enlist technology where you can. I'm not saying go AI chat, GTP chat, but enhance technology with reminders on your laptop and on your phone and so on. I know with my laptop I can talk to it and it will transcribe it into text, which is great. So if I have to prepare something, then I can just dictate to my laptop, it will transcribe it, and I can just do the necessary corrections as far as grammar, punctuation, etc. is concerned. If you can go out for lunch, leave the office, that is good. It gives you that break. If you're in a space where you can go for a walk or go and do some window shopping or go and sit somewhere and read a book, just get that complete break from work during your lunch hour. when appropriate and practical, take time off. Say to your superior, I want next Wednesday afternoon off. I've been really busy. I've done my bit, and I want a day off or an afternoon off or 2 days off, depending, again, if you're in the building and allied trades, they normally close over December, January. So it may be a little bit more tricky for you to take time off. But if you're in a position where you can take a half a day or a day's unpaid leave, and then do it. It is for your well-being and for the well-being of your family and friends, and, as I say, personal care, self-care. So go for that facial, go for that massage, go and have your nails done. For the guys, go and play a round of golf or whatever it is that guys do that they really enjoy their personal time. For my husband, it is pottering around in the garden. So, if that's your thing, take an afternoon or a day and go and work in your garden, and that gives you a lot of satisfaction to see how nice it looks and how the plants and things grow. Communicate with your manager, with your superior. Communicate with them that you're battling, that you're finding it difficult to cope with the workload or with what's expected of you. So, Samantha, you didn't say exactly what your issue is with work-life balance. So I'm talking generally, but if you have a specific issue that your manager is expecting you to always be the one to do the month-end reports, and there are other people who are quite capable to do it, but they're just not being asked because they don't do it as well as you do it, well, they have to learn. And that's the end of that. Unless it is one of your key performance outcomes that you got the job because you said you were the best report writer money can buy, well, then, of course, then you have to live up to that. But it still means there has to be a managing of the burden that is placed on you. And that can be the amount of work. It could be the deadlines that's given to you. There are a whole lot of permutations that one can look at when it comes to that. So it really is important that, first of all, as I say, you have the boundaries. And remember, boundaries go with the ability to say no. You cannot be a people's pleaser. You cannot think, well, if I say no, she won't like me and he will be cross with me and my co-workers will get the hump, etc., etc. If they want to, well, then it's their democratic right. As I've said to you, if you're old enough to drink and to drive and to vote and to smoke, then you're old enough to be upset if you so choose. And that's a choice that they make. And as long as you are acting within your rights, then that being cross with you without sufficient or necessary grounds is a way of manipulation and bullying. It's like sulking, which we've chatted about before. Sulking is manipulation. Well, and then we tend to say, oh, well, let me just do it. Otherwise, he's going to sulk. He's going to ignore me, won't greet me in the morning. She won't greet me. Let them. That is their choice. You have to choose what's right for you. And remember, we only feel guilty if we've done something wrong. So do not allow someone, because you teach people how to treat you, to make you feel guilty when you have done nothing wrong. But when you have been on saying, you know what, I am no longer going to work through my lunch hour. I am no longer going to stay after work to finish something that is totally unnecessary. I am now prioritizing myself, my family, without treading on the rights of the employer. Remember, being assertive means I get what I want without trampling on the rights of others. So your employer has the right to insist that you are at work on time and that you don't leave before it's the end of day, and that if your lunch hour is an hour, you don't take an hour and 10 minutes. Those are their rights. It is your employer's right to insist that you produce the work which you have been appointed to do. But it is not their right to insist that you stay after hours, or that you take work home and bring it back tomorrow all nice and complete. That is not a right. It is your right to say, I'm no longer prepared to do this. So I hope, Samantha, that helps. As I say, I want to tie it together in a bow and say, prioritize, set boundaries, know your rights, and stick to them. Those are really the important things for setting work-life balance. And when you are at home, make sure, I know we all like to sit down and sometimes just do nothing or watch mindless TV, but try and schedule activities that feed you, that nourish you. So, as I say, going for lunch with friends, that includes, of course, partners, but that we sometimes say, let's go for a nice dinner. Make sure you get some exercise. Go into nature. Go and walk along the beach. I believe the sardines are on their way. So go and see the sardines, the dolphins, the sharks. Get out. Don't go home and dive into that housekeeping and dive into all those other things we have to do, and you find your life is one long slog. And that week after week, it's copy paste. I work, I go home to work. I sleep, I eat, I work, I go home to work. And there's not much variation. Punctuate your life with activities that feed your soul and that you can draw on and draw from for the next week or two, till you can have another activity or a repeat of the one that you thoroughly enjoyed to feed you again. It's like having a young baby who cries a lot. If you can have a good night's sleep, you can cope with a difficult baby during the day. But if you're not sleeping at night because baby's crying, and during the day baby's crying and it's colicky, it becomes very difficult to cope. So life doesn't change much from that. We can cope with the challenges and with difficulty if we have that balance of having the work-life balance, making sure your personal life, your personal needs is nourished and nurtured and taken care of, and that your work is nourished and nurtured and taken care of, but that the one does not totally obliterate the other. That is so important, because the consequences, as I say, apart from the negative effects to your self-care, to your psychological health, to your stress levels, to your family life, if it carries on unchecked, it can end with anxiety and depression. Anxiety and depression go hand in hand in many, many cases. It can end up in burnout, everything that goes with burnout, and the health issues and as I say, psychological issues that go with that. So a work-life balance is really way more important than people sometimes think it is. We'll think, I've got a job and I've got to keep my job, and therefore I'm going to work and work and work and work, no matter what it takes, till it's taken it. And then you find, I now am burnt out. I have now got other issues. My partner, my family are totally ticked off with me. I've lost my friends because they just never see me, and when I'm at home, I'm too tired to do anything or to spend meaningful time with them. So I hope that helps, Samantha. I hope that you found something in there, and I know when I have these chats with you, I do tend to share a lot, and I do tend to go a little bit all over the show because there's so much I want to share with you. But again, as always, you can drop me an email, you can give me a call, you can contact me, and I'll be happy to help you and maybe just flesh out, to unpack your very particular issue that is specific to you. So folks, I do hope you enjoyed that. As always, it's my privilege to chat with you. And as I say, if you want to share the chat, it's on YouTube, it's on Spotify. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe so that it can continue to be available to people who want to and who need to hear it. Till next week, keep those suggestions coming. I utterly love hearing from you, and I look forward to receiving something else that is special to you and that you want to learn about.
The radio station you can't live without. This is your radio.
This is South Coast Radio.